Our next speaker, Jonathan Goerlach, who's a Paralympian who is hopefully going to be a winner at the Rio Games, who's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the things that he's experienced and some of the highlights of his journey to where he is today.
I've been fortunate enough to speak at other events, but today is the first time I've been able to speak to people who can truly empathise with me as either a person with a vision impairment or being associated with that person. When preparing my speech, I thought long and hard about what message I wanted to provide each of you, with the common goal being preparation for your future. I felt I needed to share a period of my life which is most significant to me, bearing the highs and lows that come with living with a vision impairment, but also paints a positive picture and outlook for you all. I like to call this story my Dutch courage. Before I start, I need to set the scene and give you a brief insight into how I reached the beginning of this story. At age 15, I had the world at my feet. I wanted to be a professional sports star, a future Wimbledon champion or an Olympic champion. But a visit to a local optometrist washed away those dreams when I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. This meant I would eventually end up with tunnel vision, night blindness, and potentially go completely blind. What advice did my family receive with this news? Well, apart from an educational pamphlet and being told to get a good pair of sunglasses, not a single bit of support was provided. No referral to a support group, a counsellor to deal with the life-changing news, not even an ounce of concern as to what we were supposed to do next. So over the next 12 years, with nowhere to turn for support or anyone to talk to on the same page as me, I just got on with it as best I could, tripping and bumping my way through life, metaphorically and physically speaking. Until one day, 11 years since my diagnosis, my GP urged me to have my eyes tested again, in an attempt to start preparing myself for what lay ahead. My GP was right. I wasn't prepared at all. This was my first eye test since the diagnosis, only to have the ophthalmologist bluntly tell me what I had repressed all this time. I really was going blind, and I haven't even attempted accepting it. The following 18 months were some of the toughest of my life. Anxiety, depression, no sense of direction, and all the while, pushing my friends and family farther and farther away. Something desperately needed to change, and I was the only one that could do something about it. And so the story of my Dutch courage begins. I'd travelled overseas before, backpacking solo for anywhere up to 4 months at a time, managing to get through each trip safely with my vision impairment, always finding the experience satisfyingly challenging. But to be as daring as moving to a foreign country on a whim, one-way ticket in one hand, work visa in the other, and only a small amount of savings to get me started over there. This would be a big risk, legally blind or not. For the first time in a long time, I made a decision I'd do what I wanted, not what I wanted to, and not be held back by the overcaring grasp of my family and friends. Those closest to me knew I had to do this. All they could do was worry from afar and trust that I would find what I was looking for. To be totally honest, I had no idea what I was looking for. All I knew was that I needed to escape the trapped life that I built for myself. I needed to reclaim my independence. I needed to figure out what it meant to live with a disability. The first part of this new adventure involved treating myself to a holiday. For 3 months I visited places like Koh Samui in Thailand, for example, which provided some tricky times. Like when I'd walk off in search of a restaurant after dark with only my little keyring torch, and the hotel address on a piece of paper in my pocket just in case I got lost. I'd also find myself catching the wrong overnight bus from Barcelona to San Fermin for the running of the Bulls Festival, only to be dropped off 3 hours away in San Sebastian at 4 a.m. with a 5-hour wait until the next bus back to my destination. And for those of you who might be thinking, did he run with the Bulls? As much as the thought crossed my mind, I didn't want to be the first legally blind person to attempt this. Or be attacked by a 700-pound bull. The most significant checkpoint during the 3 months was Lake Windermere in the Lakes District in northern England. There were no signs of beaches or 700-pound bulls. But this is where, for the first time, I met other people my own age with retinitis pigmentosa. Those following 4 days at the UK's Foundation Fighting Blindness annual gathering proved to be one of the most pivotal moments in my life. Although I'd never met these 5 young people before, we connected in a way that I never thought would be possible. We shared a common thread in our stories, which would see us all begin to accept that we weren't alone in this world. Lake Windermere wasn't all about sitting and talking though. One afternoon, we ventured out into town, which was interesting when you picture 5 legally blind people jumping out of a taxi, looking a little confused as to how to move from A to B without losing someone or taking out a pedestrian. Or even our canoeing trip, which at times looked like there was a whirlpool without an actual whirlpool. By the end of our time together, we'd formed a bond that still to this day sees us as close friends. The next chapter had now arrived. I'm standing outside of Amsterdam's busy central train station, having a moment to myself, staring into the very foreign city that would be my home for the next 14 months, feeling scared, homesick, and excited all at once. Before leaving Australia, I had decided on a motto that would form the basis of every decision I would make from then on. When presented with a choice, take yourself outside your comfort zone. Live outside the square, for life is made up of opportunities, even the ones you miss. There are a few significant examples that shaped my time over there. Creating a new life for myself with a vision impairment in a non-English speaking country was much harder than I expected. Securing a job, finding a place to live, understanding basic Dutch words, shopping in a Dutch supermarket, and learning the layout of the city were all difficult tasks. Another notable example was finding a job at a dining in the dark restaurant where the staff, it's very cool, where the staff were all vision impaired or blind. Working with restaurant Sea Taste, as it's named, meant spending more time working in the dark than in the light. But in an odd way, I felt more relaxed and comfortable in that environment than any other working environment before. When you think about it, this is one job where I am not disadvantaged by my disability, where I'm actually able to adapt and develop the mobility skills I'd learnt myself over the years. And on top of this, I'd spent many nights answering guest questions about my vision loss and how I was able to see in the dark. This wasn't just an opportunity to educate people about the many different types of vision impairments, but most significantly for me, I learned to feel comfortable talking about my disability and sharing my story with people I'd never met before. The final example of my time in Amsterdam is the most important and is the main reason I've taken the path I am on now. Through the mentally challenging period of my life, which prompted me to move to Holland, one piece of advice stuck with me. That was, to find something you are passionate about. Focus all of your time and energy into that, and the rest will just work itself out. I'd sit and ponder that advice, thinking about what I was passionate about. In the beginning, I couldn't think of anything, until I cast my mind back to the days when I did nothing but play sport. But I'd given up on that part of my life. I was going blind and couldn't compete like I used to. How would I find a sport that would cater for me? Finding a spark of inspiration from the masses of tourists making their way into Amsterdam for the local marathon, I began feeling the hunger to start running again. I decided the Amsterdam Athletics Club, 100 metres down the road from my doorstep, was a sign that I should join and just see where it would take me. It didn't take long at all for the competitive streak in me to return, attending every training session at the old Olympic Stadium and making plans to enter races. It was around this time that the London Olympics was building momentum. I'd always dreamed of representing my country at the Olympics, but never the Paralympic Games. Was I even eligible to compete at the Paralympics? In a rush of curious excitement, I emailed the Australian Paralympic Committee with my most recent eye test results and waited with eager anticipation for their response. And it was the news I'd hoped for. In their words, I was more than eligible to compete as an athlete with a disability. And I didn't care about the disability tag though, if it meant I could call myself an athlete. By this stage, all sorts of emotions were rushing through me. That feeling of passion I'd had in abundance as a kid was consuming me again. I had a newfound sense of enthusiasm at running training, but when I caught eye of the news that triathlon had been accepted into the Rio Paralympics, my focus was immediately shifted. I wanted to be the first to represent Australia in a new Paralympic sport. With only 1 year remaining until the London Paralympic Games, I decided I couldn't possibly be ready in time with running. So the thought of having 5 years to prepare for Rio allowed me to believe I had an opportunity. I also realised that Paralympians were indeed elite athletes, just as much as able-bodied athletes. This wasn't going to be an easy task. If I was serious about this becoming a real goal, I needed to be in the perfect training environment, surrounded by a support network that would get me there. I needed to go home. I was ready to go home. For those of you who know what is involved in a triathlon, you would know that swimming is a key component of the sport. Without doing it, you'll be stuck at the start line. So a logical thinking person would avoid a sport like triathlon if they had never learnt to swim. Not me. My aquaphobia began as an infant, a near drowning experience at age 3. In all my stubbornness, and probably genuine fear, I avoided just about anything to do with the water my whole life. But with all the Dutch courage I brought home with me, I was determined to face and overcome one of my biggest fears in order to become a Paralympian. Although I was still learning to swim, I still had to start racing triathlons. After only one race, involving an anxiety-filled 750-metre open water swim, a 20-kilometre tandem bike ride and a 5-kilometre run, I had qualified for my first ever World Championships in Auckland, where I finished in an unexpected 5th position. Perhaps I had a shot at this sport after all. My road to Rio had only just begun. Today, I'm the 2-time national champion vision-impaired para-triathlete. I've also been selected by the National Sport Federation of Triathlon Australia as part of the Elite Athlete High Performance Program, building towards Rio 2016. This meant I needed to move to Canberra to train at the Australian Institute of Sport. but relocating this time was a lot easier than my Amsterdam experience, that's for sure. I'm also currently the fastest cyclist and runner in my para-triathlon category in the world. If I can continue to improve my swim, there's no reason why I can't become a world champion, or better still, a Paralympic champion. As I reflect on all that has happened since I shifted my focus to this one goal, I'm able to see the bigger picture clearer than any 2020 vision would allow. The roller coaster journey, the achievements, the challenges, the humbling people I've met, and the support that continues to grow and guide me have all led me to this moment of realisation that it doesn't matter if I win a gold medal or even make it to a Paralympic Games. All that is important is that just by doing what you love to do, what you are most passionate about, you can positively influence the way one other person views their world. There is no greater achievement. With my story now told, my hope is that you all leave here with your own slice of Dutch courage. My final message, though, is not to tell you that everything will be okay, because you all know that already just by being here today. My message is simply to be inspired and inspirational, to find passion within your own lives and be passionate too, and to love those closest to you unconditionally and to allow yourself to be loved. You can all lead by example. Be that positive source of support the kids need most and set them on a path to greatness too. Thank you.
See the future and support leading research at savesiteinstitute.org.au.